Damien cross-froze at the window of his own castle, his heart pounding for a reason he could not explain. Someone was moving through the dark garden below, slipping between the shadows of the old stone walls like they did not want to be seen. He had lived in this castle his whole life. He knew every path, every hidden gate, every place where a person could disappear into the night. And right now, someone was using all of them. He narrowed his eyes and watched the small figure move quickly past the guards, who seemed to notice nothing. That alone told him something was wrong. No servant should be able to slip past trained guards without a single word of warning. Either his guards were careless, or this person was very good at not being caught. Damien was the alpha king of the Blackthorn Pack, a position that came with power, respect, and constant danger. Rulers like him did not have the luxury of ignoring strange behavior. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every whisper could be the beginning of a plot against his throne. He had lost people he loved because he trusted too easily once before, and he promised himself he would never make that mistake again. He left his room without calling for anyone. If this was truly a threat to his pack, he wanted to see it with his own eyes before anyone else knew what was happening. He moved down the private stairs at the back of the castle, the ones only he and a few trusted guards knew existed, and stepped out into the cool night air. The figure was already far ahead, moving toward the edge of the forest that bordered the castle grounds. Damien followed, staying low, using the trees and bushes for cover. His senses, sharp from years of training, picked up small details. The person carried a bag, heavy enough to slow their steps but not heavy enough to stop them. They moved with purpose, like they had walked this path many times before. Questions raced through his mind. Was this a spy sent by a rival pack? Was someone stealing from the castle storerooms? He had heard whispers in recent days about missing supplies, small amounts of food and medicine that no one could explain. The stewards had blamed mice, then careless kitchen staff, but Damien had never fully believed either explanation. Now, watching this figure vanish into the trees with a bag full of something, he wondered if he had finally found his answer. He quickened his pace, careful not to make a sound. The forest around the castle was old and thick, filled with paths that most people avoided after dark. Wolves like him were not afraid of the dark, but ordinary humans and even some pack members feared the stories told about these woods. Whoever this was clearly did not share that fear. After several minutes of careful tracking, Damien realized he recognized the walk. It belonged to a young woman named Alena, one of the servants who worked in the castle kitchens. She was quiet, almost invisible in the busy halls of the castle, the kind of person others walked past without a second glance. Damien himself could not remember ever speaking to her directly. She kept her eyes down, did her work, and disappeared before anyone noticed her. Why would a quiet kitchen servant be sneaking through the forest at night with a bag full of supplies? His mind offered several answers, none of them good. Perhaps she was meeting someone from an enemy pack, trading castle secrets for money. Perhaps she was part of a larger group planning something against him. He had learned the hard way that even the quietest people could hide the most dangerous secrets. Trust was a luxury an alpha king could rarely afford. He almost called out to stop her right there. As the ruler of this pack, he had every right to demand an explanation. But something held him back. Instinct, maybe, or curiosity. He wanted to see where she was going before he confronted her. If she truly was working against him, he needed to know who else was involved before he acted. The path grew narrower, twisting between old trees whose roots rose from the ground like sleeping serpents. Damien had to be more careful here, choosing each step to avoid snapping a branch or disturbing the leaves. Alena, however, moved without hesitation, clearly familiar with every twist and turn. Finally, after what felt like a long walk but was likely only 20 minutes, Damien saw a faint light ahead. It was small, flickering, the kind of light that came from a single candle or lantern. Elena's pace picked up as she got closer, and Damien slowed even further, staying far enough back that his presence would not be noticed. The light came from a small cottage, old and half hidden by vines and fallen branches. It looked abandoned from the outside, the kind of building most people would walk past without a second thought. But smoke rose gently from a small chimney, and the light in the window told a different story. Someone lived here, or at least, someone visited often enough to keep a fire going. Damien crouched behind a white tree at the edge of a small clearing, close enough to watch but far enough to remain hidden. His wolf senses sharpened, picking up sounds from inside the cottage. Voices. Young voices. Children. His confusion deepened. Whatever he expected to find in these dark woods, it was not this. Alena knocked twice on the cottage door, a clear signal that someone inside recognized immediately. The door opened just enough to let her slip inside, and Damien caught a glimpse of small faces looking up at her with something he had not seen in a long time. Relief. Trust. Even joy. He needed to know more. Careful not to make a sound, he moved closer to the cottage, positioning himself near a cracked window where he could see and hear without being noticed. What he saw next would stay with him for the rest of his life, though he did not know that yet. All he knew, in this moment, was that nothing about tonight was what he expected. His heart, usually steady and controlled even in the face of danger, began to beat faster. Whatever secret Alena was hiding, it was about to be revealed, and Damien could sense, even before he fully understood it, that this discovery would change something important. He just did not yet know how much. Through the cracked window, he watched Alena kneel down among a group of children. There were 5 of them, ranging from what looked like a toddler barely able to stand to an older boy who seemed to be around 10 years old. Their clothes were worn thin, patched in places where they had clearly been mended more than once. Their faces were pale, some marked with the tired look of children who had not eaten well in days. Alena opened her bag and began pulling out small loaves of bread, a jar of something that looked like medicine, and a folded blanket. The children gathered around her with the eagerness of people who had learned not to expect much but still hoped for everything. She spoke to them softly, her voice carrying warmth that Damien had never once heard from her during her quiet, obedient work in the castle kitchens. He watched her check the smallest child's forehead, frowning slightly before reaching for the jar of medicine. She measured a small amount with practiced hands and coaxed the child to drink it, humming a gentle tune all the while. The older boy helped her unfold the blanket and wrapped it around 2 younger children who huddled close to the small fire. Damien's mind raced. These were not ordinary orphan children from the village. Something about their posture, the way they moved and spoke to each other, told him they were pack children, wolf children. But healthy pack children were rarely left without care. The Blackthorn pack had structures in place, families and elders responsible for every child born within its borders. Unless these children fell outside that structure entirely. He remembered, faintly, whispers from years past about Omega families, the lowest-ranked wolves in pack hierarchy, sometimes treated as lesser simply because of the strength of their wolf or the standing of their bloodline. He had never paid much attention to such matters, trusting his counsel to handle the details of pack administration while he focused on defense and diplomacy. Now, watching these children, he wondered how much he had missed by trusting others to manage what should have mattered to him directly. Elena's voice drifted through the cracked window, clear enough for him to catch fragments of what she said. She told the children a story, something about a brave little wolf who found kindness in unexpected places. The children listened with wide eyes, forgetting for a moment their hunger and their tiredness. Even the sick child managed a small smile. Damien realized, with a strange tightness in his chest, that this was not the first time Alena had done this. The children knew her. They trusted her completely, the way children only trust someone who has proven themselves again and again. This was a routine, a secret life she had built entirely separate from her quiet daytime work in his castle. He thought about the missing supplies the steward had complained about, the small amounts of food and medicine no one could explain. It made sense now. Alena had been taking just enough to avoid notice, spreading her theft, if it could even be called that, across small amounts over time so that nothing seemed unusual. She was careful, patient, and clearly willing to risk everything for these children. The punishment for stealing from the royal storerooms was severe under Blackthorn law. Even minor theft could result in banishment from the pack, a fate that meant losing not just the home but the protection and identity that came with belonging to a pack at all. For someone in Elena's position, a low-ranked servant with no family connections to protect her, banishment could mean losing everything, possibly even her life in the dangerous world outside Packlands. And yet here she was, laughing softly with children who were not her own, risking her entire future for people the rest of the world had forgotten. Damien stayed hidden at the window for a long while, watching this scene unfold. He noticed small details he would not have expected. The way Alena checked each child carefully for signs of illness before settling them down to sleep. The way she saved the last piece of bread for herself only after making sure every child had eaten enough. The way she smiled, a real smile, nothing like the careful, guarded expression she wore inside the castle walls. He thought about the noble daughters currently competing for the position of Luna, women raised with wealth and status, groomed since childhood to understand politics and pack law. None of them, as far as he knew, had ever set foot in a place like this. None of them had ever given up their own comfort for children who could offer nothing in return. A strange thought crossed his mind, one he quickly pushed aside as impossible. He was here to investigate a theft, to protect his pack from any threat, real or imagined. He was not here to reconsider his entire approach to choosing a Luna based on a single night of secret observation. Still, as he watched Alena tuck a thin blanket around the smallest child and whisper something that made the boy giggle quietly, Damien felt something shift inside him, something he could not yet name. He decided, in that moment, that he would not reveal himself tonight. Whatever this was, whatever Alena was doing and why, he needed to understand it fully before he acted. He needed to know more about the woman he had almost ignored his entire life. He turned quietly and made his way back through the forest, his mind full of questions that refused to settle into simple answers. Tonight, he had come looking for a thief. Instead, he found something far more complicated, and far more important than he ever expected. 3 days passed, and Damien could not stop thinking about what he had seen in that hidden cottage. He sat through council meetings without hearing half of what was said, his mind returning again and again to the image of Alena kneeling beside those children, giving away her own food, humming songs to calm their fears. He had ruled the Blackthorn Pack for 6 years, since the death of his father, and in all that time, he had never once questioned whether he truly knew the people living inside his own castle walls. He decided he needed answers, but he was not ready to confront Alena directly. If he called her before him and demanded explanations, she would likely panic, perhaps even lie out of fear of punishment. He wanted the truth, not a frightened servant repeating whatever she thought would save her from banishment. So instead, he chose to watch, carefully and quietly, learning what he could before deciding his next move. He started by asking the head steward, an older wolf named Harold, about Alena's history within the castle. Harold seemed surprised that the Alpha King would take interest in such a minor servant, but he answered honestly, pulling from memory details he had not thought about in years. Alena had come to work in the castle kitchens nearly 5 years ago, arriving as a teenager with almost nothing to her name. She had no family listed in the records, no sponsor, nothing beyond a brief note stating she had been placed there following what the records vaguely called a family incident. A family incident. The words felt deliberately vague, the kind of phrase used to bury something uncomfortable rather than explain it. Damien asked Harold if he knew more, but the steward shook his head, admitting he had never asked further questions. Servants came and went, and as long as they did their work well, no one paid much attention to their past. Damien found this unsatisfying. He was used to knowing everything about the people who might affect his pack, yet somehow this young woman had lived within his own walls for 5 years, completely unnoticed. He decided to dig deeper, this time turning to the pack's official records, kept in a private archive beneath the castle library. It took him an entire evening of searching through old documents, dusty ledgers filled with names and dates that meant little without context. Finally, he found what he was looking for, a record from 6 years earlier detailing the sudden fall of a respected warrior family, the Wilfords. According to the document, the family patriarch, a decorated warrior named Aldrich Wilford, had been accused of betraying pack secrets to a rival territory. The accusation led to his immediate stripping of rank, the loss of his family's land, and exile from the pack entirely. Damien read the details carefully, noting something odd. The evidence listed against Aldrich Wilford was thin, mostly based on testimony from a single council member rather than any solid proof. He recognized the name of that council member immediately. Cedric Vane, a man who still sat on his council today, one of the most vocal supporters of a Luna candidate from his own extended family. A cold feeling settled in Damian's stomach. If Aldrich Wilford's fall had been arranged rather than deserved, that meant an innocent family had lost everything because of one man's ambition. And if Elena was connected to this family in any way, it would explain both her lack of resources and her fierce, quiet determination to help children who had nowhere else to turn. He continued searching until he found a small note attached to the back of the file, easily missed by anyone not looking carefully. It listed the names of Aldrich Wilford's surviving family members at the time of his exile. A wife, who had passed away shortly after from what the note called an illness brought on by grief. And a daughter, listed simply as Elena Wilford, aged 13 at the time. Damian sat back in his chair, the pieces falling into place with unsettling clarity. Elena was not simply a servant with no history. She was the daughter of a warrior who may have been wrongly accused, stripped of everything through what looked increasingly like a deliberate plot by a man who still held power and influence in his own council today. He thought back to the cottage in the woods, the children Elena cared for in secret. Perhaps her actions were not simply about kindness, though he had no doubt that was part of it. Perhaps she understood, more than most, what it felt like to be discarded by a system that judged people by rank rather than character. Perhaps helping those forgotten children was her way of refusing to let what happened to her happen to anyone else, at least not without someone standing in the way. The next morning, Damian summoned Cedric Vane to a private meeting, careful to keep his questions vague enough not to reveal his true purpose. He asked general questions about pack history, about warriors who had served faithfully over the years, watching Cedric's reactions carefully. When he mentioned Aldrich Wilford's name, almost casually, he noticed the slight tightening around Cedric's eyes, the brief pause before his response came too smoothly, too rehearsed. Cedric explained that Aldrich had been a talented warrior who unfortunately made a grave error in judgment, sharing information with outsiders that put the entire pack at risk. He spoke with the practiced ease of someone who had told this story many times before, confident that no one would question a version of events that had gone unchallenged for 6 years. Damian thanked him for the information and dismissed him, careful to hide the suspicion now firmly rooted in his mind. Something about Cedric's explanation felt too smooth, too convenient. A truly loyal warrior accused of betrayal should have left behind some record of dispute, some testimony from others who knew him well. Instead, the file Damian had found showed almost no investigation at all, just Cedric's word accepted without question. He decided to speak with some of the older pack members who might remember Aldrich Wilford personally. He found an elderly wolf named Bertram, long retired from active duty, who had served alongside many warriors during his time and now spent his days quietly tending a small garden near the edge of the castle grounds. When Damian mentioned Aldrich's name, Bertram's expression softened with genuine sadness rather than suspicion. He spoke warmly of Aldrich, describing him as one of the most loyal warriors he had ever served beside, a man who would never have betrayed pack secrets for any price. Bertram admitted he had always found the accusations strange, especially since they came so suddenly, right around the time Cedric Vane was pushing to expand his own family's influence within the council. Bertram lowered his voice, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear even now, years later. He mentioned that Aldrich's land, once stripped from his family, had eventually been absorbed into territory controlled by Cedric's relatives. At the time, everyone had been too afraid to question the timing, worried that speaking up might bring similar accusations against themselves. Damian left the conversation with a heavy weight settling over him. If what Bertram said was true, an innocent warrior had lost everything, his wife had died from grief, and his daughter had been left to survive alone in a world that offered her nothing, simply because Cedric Vane wanted more land and more power. And now, that same man was pushing his own daughter forward as a candidate to become Luna, standing beside Damian as if nothing had happened at all. He needed proof, real proof that could stand before the full council, not just old memories and quiet suspicions. He began quietly gathering information, speaking carefully with anyone who might remember details from that time, cross-referencing dates and land records, building a case piece by piece without revealing his true intentions to anyone, including Cedric. Meanwhile, he found himself thinking more and more about Elena herself, the young woman who carried this painful history without ever once complaining or drawing attention to herself. She worked quietly in his kitchens, took whatever small amount of supplies she needed to help children who reminded her, perhaps, of herself at that age, and asked for nothing in return. He began finding small reasons to visit the kitchens himself, something he had never done as Alpha King. He told himself he was simply observing, gathering more understanding of Elena's daily routine, but each time he saw her quietly going about her work, careful and humble, he found himself more curious about the woman behind the quiet exterior. One afternoon, he watched her carefully portion out extra bread for herself, setting it aside in a small cloth bag she kept hidden beneath a shelf. He realized she was likely preparing for another visit to the cottage that night. He wanted to follow her again, to see if there was more to learn, but he also knew he needed to be careful. If Elena noticed she was being watched too closely, she might grow suspicious, perhaps even move the children somewhere else entirely, fearing discovery. Instead, he decided to wait, choosing patience over impulsiveness, a skill he had learned through years of leading his pack through difficult decisions. He would continue gathering proof against Cedric Vane, continue learning what he could about Elena's quiet courage, and choose the right moment to act when he had everything he needed. That evening, as he stood at his window once again, watching the distant tree line where the hidden cottage waited, Damien made a private decision. Whatever happened next, whatever the council might say or think, he would ensure that Elena Wilford received the justice her family had been denied for 6 long years. He did not yet know exactly how this would unfold, but he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he could not simply walk away from what he had discovered. Little did he know, across the castle grounds, someone else had noticed his sudden interest in the quiet kitchen servant, and that person was already making plans of their own. Cedric Vane stood at his study window, watching a messenger hurry across the courtyard below with news that made his jaw tighten in barely controlled anger. His daughter Priscilla had just told him something troubling, something she had overheard from another servant. The Alpha King had been asking questions in the kitchens, had been seen speaking with old Bertram near the garden, and had spent an unusual amount of time reviewing old pack records in the private archive. Cedric was not a foolish man. He had spent years building his position within the council, carefully placing loyal supporters in key positions, ensuring his daughter's path to becoming Luna remained clear of obstacles. He knew exactly what could unravel everything he had built if the wrong questions found the wrong answers. 6 years ago, he had made a decision that secured his family's wealth and standing, and he had no intention of letting old history destroy everything now. He called for Priscilla, who arrived quickly, her expression a mixture of worry and irritation. She had grown up believing her path to becoming Luna was practically guaranteed, and the idea that some kitchen servant might somehow complicate things filled her with more anger than concern. Cedric explained, in careful terms, that they needed to act quickly before Damien's suspicions grew into something impossible to control. Priscilla suggested the simplest solution, one that made Cedric pause before ultimately agreeing. If Elena could be removed from the picture entirely, accused of a crime serious enough to guarantee her exile, then whatever the Alpha King suspected would lose its foundation. Without Elena present to answer questions or reveal information, any accusations against Cedric would remain nothing more than unproven rumors from an old man's fading memory. They settled on accusing Elena of theft from the royal treasury, a crime serious enough to result in immediate exile, perhaps even worse depending on how the council chose to respond. Cedric would arrange for evidence to be planted, small but valuable items hidden among Elena's few belongings, discovered at a moment when denial would seem impossible. Meanwhile, Elena remained unaware of the storm gathering around her. She continued her quiet routine, working through her daily duties in the kitchen, saving small portions of food when she could, and making her careful trips to the cottage whenever the timing allowed. She had grown used to a certain kind of caution over the years, always watching for signs that someone might be paying too much attention to her movements, but lately, she had noticed something different. She sensed she was being watched, though she could not identify exactly how or why she knew this. Perhaps it was the way certain guards seemed to glance her way more often, or the strange feeling of being observed during her ordinary kitchen work. She told herself it was likely nothing, simple paranoia born from years of living carefully, but the feeling refused to fully disappear. One evening, as she prepared to leave for the cottage, she noticed a guard positioned near the back garden exit, one who had never been stationed there before. She hesitated, deciding to take a longer, less direct path through the forest to avoid drawing attention. Her instincts, sharpened through years of necessary caution, told her something had changed, though she could not yet understand what. She made it to the cottage safely that night, finding the children waiting eagerly for her arrival. The smallest child, a girl named Mira who had been sick for weeks, looked noticeably better, her fever finally broken thanks to the medicine Alena had brought previously. Alena felt a wave of relief seeing the child's improved color, grateful that her efforts had made a real difference. As she settled the children for the night, telling them another story to help ease them into sleep, she found herself thinking about her own childhood, memories she rarely allowed herself to revisit. She remembered her father, strong and kind, teaching her how to be brave even when facing difficult situations. She remembered her mother's gentle voice, singing songs much like the ones she now sang to these children. And she remembered the day everything changed, when guards arrived at their family home with accusations that made no sense, tearing apart everything she had ever known. She pushed these memories aside, as she always did, focusing instead on the present moment, on the children who needed her care and attention now. Whatever happened to her family in the past could not be undone, but she could ensure that these forgotten children received at least some measure of the kindness and safety that had been stolen from her own childhood. Unknown to Alena, Damien had also returned to his private observation point near the cottage that same night, drawn back by an urge he could not fully explain. He watched her interact with the children once again, noticing new details he had missed during his first visit. The careful way she checked each child's health, clearly having learned some basic healing knowledge somewhere along the way. The patient manner in which she addressed each child's individual fears and worries, treating even the youngest with genuine respect rather than simple pity. He also noticed something else, a slight tension in her movements that had not been present during his first observation. She glanced toward the cottage windows more frequently, checked the door locks with unusual care, and seemed generally more alert to her surroundings. Damien wondered if she had somehow sensed his previous visit, though he had been extremely careful to remain hidden. He decided that tonight, he would finally reveal himself, not to confront her about theft or secrets, but to offer his protection directly. He had gathered enough evidence against Cedric Vane to begin building a case, and he no longer wanted Alena to carry this burden entirely alone, unaware that someone in a position of power now stood ready to help her. As he prepared to step forward from his hiding place, a sudden commotion at the cottage door interrupted his plans. Several guards, wearing uniforms marked with Cedric Vane's personal insignia rather than official castle guard markings, burst through the door, catching Alena and the children completely by surprise. Damien froze, watching the scene unfold with growing alarm. The guard spoke harshly, accusing Alena of theft and unauthorized use of park resources, ignoring her attempts to explain the situation. The children, terrified, huddled together in the corner of the small cottage, their cries adding to the chaos as the guards moved to restrain Alena. Damien's instincts as both a protector and a ruler kicked in immediately. He stepped forward from his hiding place, his presence alone causing the guards to freeze in shock and confusion. They had clearly not expected the Alpha King himself to witness this scene, and their confident, aggressive postures shifted instantly into uncertainty and fear. He demanded an explanation, his voice carrying the authority that came naturally from years of leadership. The guards stumbled over their words, explaining that they had received orders directly from Cedric Vane to arrest Alena on charges of theft from the royal treasury. Damien felt his suspicions confirmed, understanding immediately that Cedric had moved quickly to eliminate the threat Alena represented before Damien could act on his own gathered evidence. He ordered the guards to release Alena immediately, informing them that any further action against her would need to wait until he personally reviewed the situation. The guards, unwilling to defy their Alpha King directly despite their orders from Cedric, reluctantly agreed, stepping back and allowing Alena to move freely once again. Alena stood frozen, staring at Damien with a mixture of shock, confusion, and fear. She had never expected the Alpha King himself to appear in this hidden cottage, and she had no idea how long he might have been watching or what he truly knew about her secret activities. She glanced toward the children, still huddled fearfully in the corner, and felt a surge of protective instinct overcome her own confusion. She stepped slightly in front of the children, as if her small frame could somehow shield them from whatever judgment the Alpha King might deliver. Damien noticed this immediate, instinctive action, and something in his chest tightened with respect and admiration for her continued bravery even in this frightening moment. He spoke gently, careful to keep his voice calm despite the tension still hanging in the air. He assured Alena that she was not in danger, that he understood far more about her situation than she likely realized, and that the accusations brought against her tonight were part of a larger scheme orchestrated by someone seeking to protect their own hidden secrets. Alena struggled to process his words, uncertain whether to trust this sudden turn of events. She had spent years believing that those in power cared little for people like her, servants without family connections or influential supporters. The idea that the Alpha King himself might be standing here, defending her against false accusations, felt almost impossible to believe. Damien turned to address the guards once more, ordering them to return to Cedric Vane and inform him that any further action regarding Alena would need to go through the Alpha King directly. The guards left quickly, clearly eager to escape the tension of the situation, leaving Damien, Alena, and the frightened children alone in the small cottage. He knelt down slightly, trying to appear less intimidating to the children who still watched him with wide, fearful eyes. He spoke softly, reassuring them that they were safe now, that no harm would come to them tonight. Slowly, the youngest children began to relax, though the older boy continued watching Damien with cautious suspicion, unwilling to fully trust this powerful stranger who had suddenly appeared in their secret refuge. Alena finally found her voice, asking Damien directly how much he knew, how long he had been watching, and what he intended to do now that her secret had been discovered. Damien answered honestly, explaining that he had followed her nights ago out of simple suspicion, expecting to find evidence of theft or betrayal, but instead discovering her quiet, selfless work caring for these forgotten children. He explained what he had since learned about her family history, about Aldrich Wilford's likely false accusation and exile, about Cedric Vane's suspicious involvement in the entire affair. Alena listened with growing shock, tears forming in her eyes as she heard, for the first time from someone with real power and influence, confirmation of what she had always believed but never had proved to support. She had spent 6 years believing her father's disgrace might have been at least partially deserved, wondering privately if perhaps he truly had made some terrible mistake that justified everything that followed. Hearing Damien confirm her deeper suspicions, that her father had likely been innocent, that Cedric Vane had orchestrated the entire situation for personal gain, brought a flood of emotions she had carefully suppressed for years. Damien promised her, standing there in that small cottage surrounded by frightened children and flickering candlelight, that he would ensure justice was served, that her family's name would be restored, and that these children would receive proper care and support moving forward. Alena, though still cautious and uncertain about trusting this sudden change in her fortune, felt a small flicker of hope ignite within her chest, something she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. As dawn approached, Damien arranged for the children to be moved to a safer location within the castle grounds, under the protection of trusted guards who reported directly to him rather than through the usual chain of command that Cedric Vane could easily manipulate. Alena remained close to the children throughout the transition, her protective instincts refusing to fully relax until she was certain they were truly safe. Damien watched her interact with each child during the move, noting again the genuine care and attention she gave to every small detail of their comfort and safety. He found himself more convinced than ever that this young woman possessed qualities far more valuable than the political connections and noble bloodlines that typically determined who might become Luna of the Blackthorn Park. As the sun rose fully over the castle, Damien knew that the coming days would bring significant challenges. Cedric Vane would not simply accept defeat quietly, especially with his own daughter's future as Luna now at serious risk. A confrontation before the full council seemed inevitable, and Damien needed to ensure he had gathered enough solid evidence to expose Cedric's corruption beyond any reasonable doubt. He also needed to consider his own growing feelings toward Alena, feelings that had developed rapidly over these past few tense days. He had approached this situation initially as a matter of park security and justice, but he could no longer deny that his interest in Alena had grown into something far more personal, something that would likely complicate an already difficult political situation even further. For now, though, his immediate priority remained ensuring Alena and the children's safety while preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Cedric Vane. The next few days would determine not only Alena's future but potentially the entire direction of leadership within the Blackthorn Park. Cedric Vane received news of the failed arrest with barely controlled fury. His guards returned pale and shaken, explaining that the Alpha King himself had intervened, releasing Alena and taking the children under his personal protection. Cedric understood immediately that his plan had not only failed but had likely made his situation significantly worse. If Damien had been present at that cottage, watching everything unfold, there was a strong possibility he already understood far more about the true nature of Cedric's involvement than Cedric had hoped to keep hidden. He called an emergency meeting with his closest allies within the council, a small group of nobles who had benefited over the years from their association with his rising influence. He explained the situation carefully, emphasizing the need for unity and quick action before Damian could gather enough support to move against him publicly. Several of his allies expressed concern, worried that association with Cedric might now prove dangerous rather than beneficial, but Cedric convinced them that decisive action could still salvage the situation. He decided the best defense would be an aggressive counterattack, accusing Alena publicly of manipulating the Alpha King through deceptive means, perhaps even suggesting she had used forbidden methods to influence his judgment. If he could paint Alena as a dangerous manipulator rather than an innocent victim, he might successfully shift public opinion before Damian could present his evidence to the full council. Meanwhile, Damian spent the following days meticulously organizing everything he had gathered, ensuring each piece of evidence connected logically to build an undeniable case against Cedric Vane. He met privately with Bertram again, this time recording his testimony formally with the assistance of a trusted scribe. He revisited the old land records, carefully documenting the suspicious timing of Cedric's family acquiring territory that had previously belonged to the Wilford family. He also spent time with Alena, partly to discuss the growing case against Cedric, but increasingly simply to understand her better as a person rather than merely a victim of injustice or a servant he barely knew before recent events. Their conversations, initially focused entirely on practical matters and legal strategy, gradually expanded into deeper discussions about her childhood memories, her hopes for the children she cared for, and even her thoughts about leadership and justice within their pack. Alena found herself surprised by how easily she could speak with Damian, someone whose position should have made honest conversation difficult given the vast difference in their status. Yet he listened carefully to her opinions, asked thoughtful questions, and treated her perspective with genuine respect rather than the polite but dismissive attention she might have expected from someone in his position. She began to see him differently as well, moving beyond her initial fear and uncertainty towards something closer to genuine trust. She noticed how carefully he considered every decision affecting the children now under his protection, ensuring they received proper medical care, comfortable living arrangements, and even basic education, opportunities that had been denied to Omega children like themselves for generations under the park's existing structure. Despite the growing warmth between them, both remained acutely aware of the significant challenges still ahead. Cedric Vane would not simply accept defeat, and the political consequences of publicly exposing his corruption could create lasting instability within the park's leadership structure. Damian needed to move carefully, ensuring justice was served without causing unnecessary chaos that could weaken the Blackthorn Park's overall strength and unity. The confrontation finally arrived during a scheduled council meeting, one that Cedric had specifically requested to address what he called urgent concerns regarding recent events within the castle. Damian agreed to the meeting, recognizing this as an opportunity to present his own evidence publicly rather than allowing Cedric to control the narrative through private manipulation and rumor. The council chamber filled with nobles, advisors, and pack elders, all sensing the unusual tension surrounding this particular meeting. Word had already spread throughout the castle about the strange events at the hidden cottage, about the Alpha King's personal intervention protecting a lowly kitchen servant from arrest. Speculation ran wild, though few understood the full truth behind these dramatic events. Cedric spoke first, his voice carrying practiced confidence as he addressed the assembled council. He described Alena as a dangerous manipulator, someone who had somehow convinced the Alpha King to overlook serious crimes against the park's treasury. He suggested, carefully avoiding direct accusations that might expose him to challenge, that perhaps Alena had used underhanded methods to gain the Alpha King's sympathy and protection. Several council members murmured in response, some clearly swayed by Cedric's confident presentation, others exchanging skeptical glances, aware that something did not quite add up in his explanation. Damian waited patiently, allowing Cedric to finish his statement completely before rising to address the council directly. He began by acknowledging the seriousness of the accusations against Alena, agreeing that theft from the royal treasury would indeed represent a significant crime deserving severe punishment if true. However, he continued, careful examination of the actual evidence told a very different story than the one Cedric had just presented. He called forward Bertram, whose former testimony regarding Aldrich Wilford's likely innocence and Cedric's suspicious involvement in the original accusation immediately drew gasps from several council members. Bertram spoke clearly and confidently, despite his advanced age, describing his long friendship with Aldrich and his firm belief that the accusations against him had never made logical sense given his character and loyalty. Damien then presented the land records he had carefully gathered, showing the precise timing of Cedric's family acquiring the Wilford territory almost immediately following Aldrich's exile. He explained the pattern clearly to the council, demonstrating how unlikely it seemed that such convenient timing could occur without deliberate manipulation behind the scenes. Cedric attempted to interrupt, insisting that land acquisitions following exile were common practice and did not necessarily indicate wrongdoing. Damien acknowledged this point calmly but continued presenting additional evidence, including testimony from several other PAC members who had privately expressed similar doubts about the original accusation years ago but had remained silent out of fear. As the evidence mounted, the mood within the council chamber shifted noticeably. Council members who had initially seemed swayed by Cedric's confident presentation now exchanged worried, uncertain glances, clearly reconsidering their positions given the growing weight of evidence against him. Cedric, sensing the tide turning against him, grew increasingly desperate, raising his voice and accusing Damien of allowing personal feelings toward Alena to cloud his judgment regarding PAC security and justice. This accusation, rather than helping his case, seemed to backfire significantly, as several council members visibly bristled at the suggestion that their Alpha King would compromise PAC justice for personal reasons. Damien responded calmly, acknowledging that yes, his perspective on Alena had certainly changed since he first began investigating her activities, but emphasized that this change stemmed entirely from discovering the truth about her character and history, not from any inappropriate influence on her part. He reminded the council that true leadership required courage to admit past mistakes and correct injustices, regardless of how uncomfortable that process might prove for those responsible. He then revealed the final piece of evidence he had been saving, a written confession obtained from one of Cedric's own household staff, someone who had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Cedric's recent instructions to plant false evidence against Alena. This staff member, fearing the consequences of remaining silent while an innocent person suffered unjust punishment, had come forward voluntarily to provide a detailed account of Cedric's plan to fabricate theft charges. This revelation proved decisive. The council chamber erupted into shocked murmurs and open discussion, with several members immediately calling for Cedric's removal from his position and further investigation into his conduct over the years. Cedric, realizing the complete collapse of his careful plans, attempted one final desperate argument, insisting that even if some aspects of the original situation with Aldrich Wilford remained questionable, his current actions against Alena were justified given genuine concerns about her influence over the Alpha King. Damien firmly rejected this argument, stating clearly that fabricating evidence against an innocent person, regardless of any perceived justification, represented a serious violation of PAC law and basic decency. He called for a formal vote among the council regarding Cedric's immediate removal from his position and appropriate consequences for his actions, both past and present. The vote proceeded quickly, with an overwhelming majority supporting Cedric's removal. Even his closest allies, recognizing the undeniable weight of evidence presented, chose to distance themselves rather than risk their own reputations defending someone so clearly guilty of serious wrongdoing. Cedric was escorted from the council chamber, his face reflecting a mixture of anger, humiliation, and disbelief at how quickly his carefully constructed position of power had crumbled. Priscilla, watching from a nearby chamber where she had been observing the proceedings, felt her own future collapsing alongside her father's downfall. Her hopes of becoming Luna, once seemingly guaranteed through her father's influence and connections, now seemed impossibly distant given the scandal surrounding her family's name. With Cedric's removal confirmed, Damien addressed the remaining council members directly, formally announcing his intention to restore the Wilford family's name and reputation, acknowledging the grave injustice they had suffered 6 years earlier due to Cedric's manipulation and false testimony. He also announced plans to establish a formal review process for future accusations against PAC members, ensuring that no family would face similar unjust treatment without proper investigation and evidence in the future. Alena, who had been waiting anxiously in a private chamber during the council meeting, finally received word of the outcome. She felt an overwhelming mixture of relief, vindication, and lingering disbelief that after 6 long years of quiet suffering and uncertainty, her family's honor had finally been restored through such a dramatic and public confrontation. Damien found her shortly after the meeting concluded, her eyes still red from tears of relief and emotional release. He approached her carefully, uncertain exactly what words might adequately capture the significance of everything that had just occurred. Instead of speaking immediately, he simply extended his hand toward her, a gesture that felt more meaningful than any formal declaration could have provided in that moment. Alena took his hand, feeling a sense of connection and gratitude that went beyond simple relief at her family's restored honor. She recognized, perhaps for the first time fully, that Damien had not simply corrected a historical injustice out of political obligation or strategic necessity. He had genuinely cared about ensuring she and her family received the justice they deserved, motivated by something deeper than mere duty as Alpha King. As word of Cedric's downfall and Elena's vindication spread throughout the castle and eventually the wider Park territory, reactions varied significantly among different groups. Many ordinary Park members, particularly those from lower-ranking families who had long suspected unfair treatment within the existing hierarchy, celebrated the exposure of corruption at such high levels of leadership. Others, particularly among the noble families who had benefited from the existing power structure, expressed concern about potential instability resulting from such dramatic changes. Damien understood that restoring justice, while necessary and morally correct, would likely create ongoing challenges as he worked to rebuild trust and stability within his council and broader Park community. However, he felt confident that addressing these injustices directly, rather than allowing them to continue unchecked, represented the only path toward genuine long-term strength and unity for the Blackthorn Park. As evening fell on this momentous day, Damien found himself walking alongside Alena through the castle gardens, the same gardens where he had first noticed her mysterious nighttime activities just days earlier. Neither spoke for several minutes, simply enjoying the quiet peace after such an intense and emotionally exhausting day. Finally, Alena broke the silence, expressing her genuine gratitude for everything Damien had done, not just in restoring her family's honor, but in ensuring the children she cared for would now receive proper support and protection moving forward. Damien responded honestly, admitting that his actions, while certainly motivated by justice and proper leadership, had also been deeply influenced by his growing admiration and respect for her character and courage throughout this entire ordeal. They continued working together as darkness settled fully over the castle grounds, both aware that significant decisions still lay ahead regarding their future, both personally and in terms of Park leadership. Yet for this moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the gardens and the satisfaction of justice finally served, they simply allowed themselves to appreciate how dramatically their lives had changed since that fateful night when Damien first followed mysterious footsteps into the forest. 3 weeks passed following Cedric Vane's removal from the council, weeks filled with significant changes throughout the Blackthorn Park. Damien worked tirelessly to establish new systems ensuring fair treatment for all Park members, regardless of their birth rank or family connections. He created a formal review board to examine cases similar to what had happened to the Wilford family, allowing anyone who suspected they had faced unjust treatment in the past to bring their concerns forward for proper investigation. Alena, meanwhile, found her life transformed in ways she could barely have imagined just a month earlier. With her family's honor formally restored, she received an official pardon along with recognition of her rightful status as daughter of a respected, wrongfully accused warrior. The small amount of land that had originally belonged to her father, though now developed under different ownership, was replaced with alternative property near the eastern edge of Park territory, a gesture of formal apology from the council for the injustice her family had suffered. More importantly to Alena, the children she had secretly cared for now received official recognition and support as wards of the park, moved into a proper facility within the castle grounds where they received consistent meals, medical care, and education previously denied to Omega children throughout Blackthorn history. Alena continued visiting them daily, though now openly rather than through secret nighttime journeys through the forest. Throughout these weeks of significant change, Damien and Elena's relationship continued deepening naturally, moving beyond the intense circumstances of their initial connection into something that felt increasingly genuine and lasting. They found themselves seeking out each other's company regularly, whether discussing park matters, sharing quiet meals, or simply enjoying comfortable silence while walking through the castle gardens. Damien found himself increasingly certain about a decision that had been forming gradually since that first night he watched Alena caring for forgotten children in a hidden cottage. The noble candidates originally being considered for the position of Luna, women he had barely known beyond their family connections and political value, no longer held any appeal for him. He recognized clearly now that true leadership required someone who understood genuine compassion, someone willing to sacrifice their own comfort for the well-being of others, someone who embodied the values he genuinely wanted to represent through his own leadership. However, he understood that formally proposing Elena as his choice for Luna would likely create significant controversy within certain segments of Pak society, particularly among noble families who still held traditional views about proper qualifications for such an important leadership position. He needed to approach this decision carefully, ensuring both Elena's readiness for such a significant role and the broader Pak's acceptance of this unconventional choice. He began discussing the matter openly with Elena herself, wanting to ensure she genuinely desired this path forward rather than feeling pressured by circumstances or gratitude toward him. Elena, initially hesitant given her humble background and the weight of responsibility such a position would carry, found herself gradually warming to the possibility as she considered the positive changes she could help implement as Luna, working alongside Damian to continue building a more just and compassionate Pak community. She expressed her concerns honestly, worried about her lack of formal training in Pak politics and diplomacy, concerned about how other Pak members, particularly those from noble families, might react to her sudden elevation from servant to Luna. Damian listened carefully to her concerns, offering reassurance while also acknowledging the genuine challenges she would likely face. He proposed a gradual approach, suggesting that Elena spend time working alongside him during council meetings and diplomatic discussions, allowing her to develop necessary skills and knowledge while also giving Pak members opportunity to witness her capabilities and character directly, rather than simply announcing a sudden decision without proper preparation or transition. Elena agreed to this approach, appreciating Damian's thoughtful consideration of both her personal readiness and the broader political implications of such a significant decision. Over the following weeks, she began attending council sessions, initially observing quietly but gradually contributing her own perspectives and insights, particularly regarding matters affecting lower-ranking Pak families who had traditionally lacked adequate representation within leadership discussions. Her contributions proved genuinely valuable, offering perspectives that had been notably absent from previous council discussions. She understood, from personal experience, the daily challenges faced by Omega families and lower-ranking Pak members, insights that helped shape more inclusive and effective policies moving forward. Even council members who had initially harbored doubts about her suitability found themselves increasingly impressed by her thoughtful contributions and genuine understanding of Pak dynamics. Meanwhile, word of Elena's growing role within Pak leadership spread throughout the broader Blackthorn territory, generating significant discussion and debate among ordinary Pak members. Many, particularly those from similar humble backgrounds, expressed enthusiastic support for what they saw as a meaningful shift toward more representative and compassionate leadership. Others remained skeptical, wondering whether someone without traditional noble training could truly handle the complex responsibilities associated with becoming Luna. Damian addressed these concerns directly during a formal Pak gathering, explaining his reasoning clearly to the assembled community. He spoke about witnessing Elena's genuine character firsthand, her willingness to sacrifice her own comfort and safety for children who had nowhere else to turn, her quiet courage in maintaining her secret mission despite significant personal risk. He explained that true leadership required exactly these qualities: compassion, courage, and genuine commitment to protecting those who could not protect themselves, qualities that mattered far more than noble birth or political connections. He acknowledged that Elena would need time to develop certain skills related to formal diplomacy and Pak administration, but emphasized his confidence in her ability to learn these skills while already possessing the fundamental character necessary for effective, compassionate leadership. He reminded the gathered Pak members that his own father had often spoken about leadership being fundamentally about service to others, rather than personal status or privilege, values that Elena had demonstrated consistently long before anyone recognized her true character. The response from the gathered Pak members proved largely positive, with many expressing genuine enthusiasm about this unconventional but meaningful choice. Even some who had initially harbored doubts found themselves persuaded by Damian's sincere explanation and by their own growing awareness of Elena's demonstrated character through her ongoing work with the Pak's children and her thoughtful contributions to recent council discussions. With growing Pak support established, Damian felt confident moving forward with his formal proposal. He arranged a private, meaningful moment with Elena, away from the pressures and formality of official Pak business, wanting this significant decision to feel personal and genuine rather than purely political or strategic. He brought her to the same hidden cottage where their story had truly begun, now transformed from its previous state of quiet secrecy into a properly maintained building serving as an official gathering place for Pak children and their caretakers. Standing in this meaningful location, surrounded by memories of where he first witnessed her genuine character and courage, Damian formally asked Elena to become his Luna, to stand beside him as an equal partner in leading and protecting their park community. Elena, though she had anticipated this moment given their recent discussions and the gradual transition she had experienced within park leadership, still felt overwhelmed by genuine emotion hearing Damian's sincere proposal. She thought back to her difficult childhood, the loss of her family's honor and stability, the years of quiet servitude and secret sacrifice, never imagining her life could transform so dramatically into this moment of genuine partnership and shared purpose with someone she had grown to deeply respect and care for. She accepted his proposal, not simply as an escape from her previous humble circumstances, but as genuine acceptance of shared responsibility and commitment to building a better future for their entire park community together. Their formal announcement to the broader park community, several weeks later, was met with widespread celebration, particularly among lower-ranking families who saw in Elena's elevation genuine hope for more inclusive and compassionate leadership moving forward. The formal ceremony marking Elena's official recognition as Luna took place on a clear, bright day, attended by park members from across the entire Blackthorn territory. Unlike traditional ceremonies that typically emphasized noble lineage and political connections, Damian ensured this ceremony highlighted genuine character and service, inviting several of the children Elena had cared for to participate in small but meaningful ways, symbolizing the values that had brought her to this significant position. Following the ceremony, Damian and Elena immediately began implementing broader changes throughout the park, formally establishing the Hidden Cottage as an official sanctuary and support center for Omega children and families facing similar challenges to what Elena had experienced. They created formal training programs to help these children develop skills and confidence, ensuring they would have genuine opportunities for meaningful contribution to park society, rather than facing the marginalization and neglect that had characterized Omega treatment for generations. Bertram, now formally recognized for his crucial testimony in restoring the Wilford family's honor, took on an advisory role within this new sanctuary program, sharing his wisdom and experience with younger park members while also helping ensure continued vigilance against similar injustices occurring in the future. He often remarked, with quiet satisfaction, how proud Aldrich Wilford would have been witnessing his daughter's remarkable journey from quiet servitude to meaningful, compassionate leadership. As months passed, the positive changes implemented by Damian and Elena's partnership became increasingly evident throughout the Blackthorn Park. Reports of unjust treatment toward lower-ranking families decreased significantly, replaced by a growing sense of unity and shared purpose across previously divided social classes. Children who might have previously faced neglect and marginalization now received genuine support and opportunity, gradually strengthening the entire park community through more inclusive and compassionate policies. Elena never forgot her own difficult journey, often personally visiting families facing similar challenges to what she had experienced, ensuring they understood genuine support and care remained available to them through proper park channels, rather than requiring secret, risky measures as she had once needed. Her personal experience with hardship and injustice continued informing her leadership decisions, ensuring policies remained genuinely compassionate rather than simply theoretical improvements disconnected from actual community needs. Damian, watching Elena's continued growth and effectiveness as Luna, felt genuine satisfaction knowing his initial suspicious investigation into mysterious nighttime activities had ultimately led to such meaningful positive transformation, both for Elena personally and for the broader Blackthorn Park community. He often reflected on how close he had come to missing this remarkable woman entirely, how easily he might have simply confronted her that first night with harsh accusations rather than taking time to understand the genuine truth behind her actions. Their partnership continued strengthening over time, built on genuine mutual respect, shared values, and deep appreciation for each other's unique strengths and perspectives. Together, they worked consistently to ensure the Blackthorn Park embodied genuine justice and compassion, rather than simply maintaining traditional hierarchies that had previously allowed corruption and injustice to persist unchecked. The Hidden Cottage, once a secret refuge born from necessity and quiet desperation, stood transformed into a symbol of hope and positive change throughout the entire park territory. Visitors from neighboring park territories sometimes traveled specifically to witness this remarkable sanctuary, curious about the unconventional but clearly effective approach to leadership that had emerged from such humble and unexpected beginnings. Years later, park members would still share stories about how their alpha king had once followed mysterious footsteps into the forest, expecting to uncover betrayal or theft, but instead discovering the genuine heart and character of the woman who would become their beloved Luna. This story served as a lasting reminder throughout Blackthorn Park history that true leadership and worthiness could not be measured through noble birth or political connections alone, but through genuine compassion, courage, and unwavering commitment to protecting and supporting those who needed it most. Alena and Damien's partnership, born from an unexpected discovery in a hidden forest cottage, ultimately transformed not just their own lives, but the entire future direction and values of the Blackthorn Park, creating a lasting legacy of justice, compassion, and genuine leadership that would influence generations of park members long after their own story had become part of treasured park history and tradition.